Hello, everybody. Welcome to another studio session with the Studio Creative Boom's private community. We are very proud today to welcome Simon Dixon of DixonBaxi. Thank you for all coming. Appreciate it at 4 o'clock on this very warm afternoon in Great Britain. Hello, Simon.
Hello, how are
Hello.
you?
We are live on the interwebs.
Well, you look fabulous, you sound fabulous.
Likewise, we were talking about each other's hair before, weren't we? That was an interesting conversation. I'm obviously not going grey yet.
Thank you very much. I am.
Thank you everybody for joining. Please do chat by all means in the chat. We welcome your comments. I will try and join in when Simon's doing his talk in a minute. We also, just to tell you about the format, basically Simon's going to do a session. He's going to talk. He's going to do a really nice sort of presentation. 24-year overnight success, how we built Dixon Baxi. So that's going to be fab. We'll have a Q&A session at the end, and best question wins a prize, which is...
It's a Hobson's choice. You can have an hour's mentorship with me or the new DixonBaxi remix book. So it's your choice.
Fab. So with that in mind, make sure you put your questions in the Q&A, not the webinar chat. So you'll find the Q&A with a little speech bubble and question mark link on the bottom of this Zoom window. All right, without further ado, shall we just let you crack on? Because we've got 45 minutes to tell us about how you're a 24-year, not 24-hour.
Yeah, exactly. You could judge yourself with the success part of it. So do you want me to just dive in?
I would just dive in. Yeah, go for it.
All right. Well, hey folks, fantastic use of the heart symbols there. I'll jump in and we can start chatting about what I do and what we do. So hopefully you can see, we've gone back one earlier. There we go. You can see the DixonBaxi logo? Yeah, okay, great. So I'll just dive in. This is myself, so I'm Simon Dixon, and on the right there is Aporva Baxi, and this is myself and Aporva in America, just before we decided to start DixonBaxi in 2001. The guy in the middle is obviously hired for the photo shoot. He's not a friend of ours. And Katie kind of mentioned it, but we have this idea that we're a 24-year overnight success. When people talk about agencies and how do you have an agency, how to get these clients, how to get whatever, it's years and years of just showing up and hopefully people liking what you do. And the thing that we think about is designing a career that we want to live, because you can make and create for money, it can be a job, but what happens is if you don't self-determine what you want to be, you'll be stuck living someone else's idea of what you should do. So we think it's important for us to self-determine that. And the four things that we think about are this idea of design for life, and that's designing from our lives, as in being defined as a creator, somebody who makes something for a living, but also designing for real life, for regular people. And we want to design for everyone everywhere. We like the power of democratized design. And we like the fact that we can design for someone in Mexico City and someone in Berlin and someone in Leeds and someone in York. But typically when you design at scale, it can get a bit rounded and homogenized. So we want to design with intent because we design for billions of people. And I don't say that as a brag. It is literally what we do. We design for hundreds of millions and billions of people. And that's what's important to us, the people we design for. So we started the studio, and after a few years, we had a studio. It's great. And it's an amazing feeling because if you don't go bust in the first year, that's kind of cool. And we had all this kind of interesting work. But we came to a period where we realized that it wasn't about what we did. It was actually curating what we didn't do and saying no and refusing certain things. And what happened was we were making some work like this. And I like a Bruce Willis movie. But being busy isn't successful for us. So making money isn't the definition of success, even though I did get to meet Bruce Willis one, which was quite an adventure. But what it made us think was we're making work for the sake of it. So we started to think about what we didn't want to do. Working with people who are disrespectful, the bullshit of life, pessimism. Definitely don't want to work for free on pitches. We don't want to work with toxic clients, and we don't just want to work for money. So what we did was we resigned 6 clients, and our parents, our bank manager, and a lot of the team thought that was a bit of a crazy idea. But what it did was it freed us up. It created a situation where we could talk about what we believe in, the things that actually matter underneath the design, underneath the creativity, the things that drive what we do. And the problem with that is belief costs. It's a hard thing to make choices where you turn work down and you don't do certain things, but we believe that it's worth paying that price anyway and self-determining. And we create two lists of things. One was the creative raison d'etre, and you might have seen this on our website if you ever go to our work. We like the idea of risk-taking work and being optimistic and showing up and being curious and embracing uncertainty and that kind of thrill of creating for a living and doing something fresh. But we also, as we define our own path, we want to embrace that change in a positive way and work the way that suits us in the team, be diverse, equitable, emotionally intelligent, be there for people and take risks and do the right things because we think it's important to do that. And we also think that it's important to be patient because a good career takes time. You can't just magic yourself into a brilliant job. You have to fight for it. You have to wrestle for it. So we wanted to be patient in that growth. And then what we got was another way of work, which I think actually started to define who we are. You know, working with people like AC Milan and the Premier League and doing work which I think was more thoughtful, was more audience-centric, was more human. And I think the team grew as people, meant that we were kind of off to the races. And this for us is what it's really about now. The work is important, the style of work, but it's the people. It's the people that we collaborate with. Behind me through the glass is 52 other people. And for me, it's not Dixon and Baxi, it's the space between those two people. And we share that with those 52 people. And that's where I get my joy now, seeing them creating things that define their career. And our job really is to create the space for them to do that. And as we're doing all of this thing, it's fine for me to say all this stuff, but we're all under this existential crisis of like, what's next? And my feeling and the team's feeling is the future isn't predicted. You've got to make your version of it. Because if you don't, the world will change around you. So it's better to be part of the change on your terms and think about your version of the future rather than that one that's spewed out by a particular person's idea of what's next. Because there's a lot of negative misery porn out there and we don't need that. So what we do is we do this thing called Super Futures. It's an invention phase. And next week, the entire studio is going to shut for a week and we're going to take a creative sabbatical, make things, do some talks, do some chats, do lots of different things, just to creatively reboot. And we did that last year. Everybody got 4 weeks to make a project, not just the designers, the producers, the finance people, the growth people, everybody in the studio assistant. And they all made something. And it was amazing because we had these 50 projects, all using new technologies, and you can see some of them here. But the idea was to create with no end result, was to create for the thrill of creating with no master and see what we want. And the reason for that is when the tools are all the same, thinking differently is a superpower. So if you're using software and systems and intelligent technologies, you all end up at the same place. Whereas if you start to think, how do I use that technology for a different reason, a personal reason, a team reason, you come up with something which is more specific to you. And we tried things analog and digital, remix, inventing. We used AI, we didn't use AI. And you can see some of the testing here, lots of different projects. We're remixing lots of ideas around fashion, interaction, sound, audio, things that had no meaning, some things that had very literal meaning. Things that move, some things that are lo-fi, some things that are hi-fi. And then that's Hayden there. He's one of our producers and he manages the expectancy of work. But he made an AR experience for football for AC Milan. He built it himself. So you could go into the crowd as an AC Milan fan, and it stopped on me laughing there, and feel what it was like to be an AC Milan fan. This guy is a producer. He didn't train in creativity, but he made an AR project, and it shows you that if you create space, anybody can create. I think it's really important. And this is what we won. We won many, many projects that are sat on our Figma. But what we actually won was the sense that we all felt like creative people together, regardless of our roles. And we've turned it into a book, a series of books, actually, the first of which we've put online. It's called Remix on our website. We're going to publish this and print it and then share it with people in about 2 months' time. And what it's really doing is kind of testing the future for us. And this is a little video for the Paradise thing I mentioned.
Remember your pressure points.
I don't know if you can hear that. I hope you can.
Big breath. 21,000. Yeah.
So, thank you. So what does that mean when it applies to real work? So, as I said, the world is a very noisy, chaotic, crazy place. So our job really is to ignore the noise and create signal, create things that cut through and make a difference. And the strongest work really isn't about chasing relevance, it creates its own relevance. So just over 20 years ago, we were asked by Formula One whether or not we'd like to do their F1 race information system. And of course, we're like, fuck, yeah, absolutely. Sorry if I'm allowed to swear, actually. I don't know. I apologize if I'm not supposed to. Okay. Fuck. Um, and what was really cool was we got to take a lot of our print knowledge, things we'd learned in gaming, and create a design system that used grids for sports information design on television that no one had ever done before. And of course, working with Formula One, it's like a life thing. It's a life experience. Really amazing. But then 20 years later, they asked us if they could chat to us about the future of F1. So it's 2 decades after we did the first one. And of course, we were like, fuck, definitely, we'll do it again. But this one was really about a system that they could flex for everybody around the world because they're a huge, huge brand. So the first thing we do is we go there. So the team goes to races, they meet people, they meet the fans. That's Tasha there, one of our design directors, holding up one of the VIP passes where she got to meet Stormzy. I obviously didn't get to go to that day, unfortunately. They did that. But you get to get under the skin of the brand. And the reason for that is creativity, any kind of scale when you're dealing with hundreds of millions of people, is pointless without insight. You're just guessing otherwise. So we want insight. But the problem is, not everybody's Gen Z and not everyone's a piece of data. Not everyone's a user. They're human beings, they're people. So yes, we have data, but what we want to do is humanize the relationship with people. And with Formula One, there are three main audiences. They have Europe, who understand the history of the sport. They know the flags, the teams, the locations. They watch 3 hours of it, the build-up, everything. In Asia, which is a new market, it's all about celebrity, it's about lifestyle, it's about behind the scenes and drive to survive. In North America, which is the other growth market, they watch 3 to 4 minutes of highlights and don't watch the race at all. So they're very different audience experiences. So we have to build a brand design system that applies to all of those things. And this is how we start, much like all of you, I'm sure. We make loads of shit that we think is cool. And we have a section in our process called Ignite, where it's a 2-week hidden section that the client doesn't see, where we have 2 weeks to make things based on the brief, but for us. And that allows us to express ourselves without the pressure of instant delivery. And it allows us to test things in a raw, low-fi way. We can stick things on the wall. We can talk about it. We made a bunch of posters because we thought it cool to do that. So maybe we'll do an exhibition at some point. And then what we do is what we call a campfire. And this is where we try and find the signal in the noise. So after a bunch of weeks, the whole team lays the work out on the table, and everybody around the table has equal voice at that point. It doesn't matter if you're an ECD, a producer, or intern. We're looking at the work, not your work. And what we're looking for is, what have we won? What's cool? What's interesting? And what it does is democratize the space. So it's not a critique of you, it's a critique of how do we take this thing forward? And what we find is it gives a much greater and a stronger share of voice for everybody at every level of the team. And then we bring the client into it. And this is what we won. We call it the racing line. It's the idea that we can go from iconic to audacious as a design system. It allows us to start to tell stories and use graphics to develop things. It can make the identity more active. Hopefully these movies are moving. Are they actually moving? Thumbs up if that is a yes. Yeah, thank you very much, whoever that was. Oh, lots of thumbs, blimey, there's millions of them. Thank you for the lots of thumbs. But then this is the reality. We have to make a lot of things. So you get lists of the clients of the brand story, the typography, working with people to build fonts, patterns, textures, digital, non-digital. There's millions of things that you have to make. Not millions, I'll say thousands, that was an exaggeration. But it's about the details. So you have to build a system that is robust at every single point of it. And it's a language which fixes and flex. It works semiotically, so you know what it is, but it also works at the point of impact. So it's about understanding the fidelity of all those different elements. We also created a celebratory logo for F175, which is their 75th anniversary. So this is celebrating, you know, 3/4 of a century of their sport whilst they're looking to the future. And there's always something quite cool if you get to get your logo on the side of a Formula One car. So that's another kind of life experience. Unfortunately, I didn't get to drive the car because I don't have a license. So I can't even drive. And then this is how the system works. So you have a logo which gives you high fidelity. And then you have the racing line, which is a kind of the idea that pulls it together. You have the design and typographic system patterns and things like that. And it gives you flexibility in how that system's used. It gives you flexibility in how you layer typography, naming the priorities, balancing different ideas together. And again, you can start to see how you test the motion theory of that, how it moves and how it sounds and how it has flexibility when it's in social versus on TV screens, on your phone versus in the real world. And it's a lot of fun, this part, because you can start to create a much more textural language with things. And you're also thinking about those different experiences because obviously in the fan zone at a race, it's very, very different if you want to wear some merch on the street. And what we've got to account for is the experience in your hand is very different to the experience if you're wearing something, which is different to race day, which is different if you're just checking up on the latest story. So it allows for babies to wear headsets as much as bright young things to wear jumpsuits wherever they may hang out and wear jumpsuits. And then this is where you start to build the brand fame. So this was the F75 launch at the O2. It launched the cars, it launched the teams, it launched the season. And again, it's quite a humbling experience to, and again, I didn't go to this, the team went. You'll see a kind of strand of bitterness in this entire presentation where we've had all these life experiences and I didn't attend them, but I've seen the photographs. But it is an amazing thing. It's a very humbling thing to see your work at this scale. And it shows you why it's important to get it right, because there's thousands of people in this audience. And at Silverstone last weekend, there was 500,000 people at the race. But around the world, there's 500 million people who watch the sport. So this is when it launched, all the drivers looking hunky. This is what it looks like on race day after the event. So this is when someone's won. This is what it looks like on the track side or the video side. And you get to see how that texture works. So there's a nice dynamic to the graphics. And then you get into, I was saying, the fun thing of what it feels like to wear it, you know, so they're making merchandise, which is part of lifestyle or doing collabs rather than it just wearing F1, you know, team jerseys. It means that it can be something that you carry on your shoulder or you could buy as a gift for a friend. And then, of course, it has to work digitally. So it has to work as part of conversations and tell stories and, you know, give space to the drivers, the teams and the other elements. And this is how it comes together. Imagine, for some reason, there's no audio playing on this. So imagine a really awesome soundtrack and lots of like engines and like type of shit. It makes it cooler. I quite like the design though. So even without the sound, I think it looks okay. But you can see how it works. It has great flexibility, but you still know it's from the same thing. And then sometimes it can be very, you know, kind of textural and very human. Other times it can be very systemized and it's delivering messages. And it's also about how, you know, you're building narratives basically, because Formula One's a story. It's associated ideas, relationships, heroes and villains and all that kind of good stuff. So pop, there we go. That's our friends at Formula One. So there's another thing that we like, which is, and you'll know this from me because I'm not a particularly cool man, but we like the idea of being brave enough to be uncool, is to not follow trends and to look for the threading things which are about the reality of what you're designing rather than what people think is cool. So we did a project recently for a brand called Tubi. And Tubi is a streaming platform in America, and there's a shitload of streaming platforms, and they're all kind of the same. So this is what we get faced with, is this is what Tubi looked like. It's a bit confusing. I'm not quite sure how they got where they were, but they're a successful business. But basically, it's a wall of stuff. Everybody does like a Netflix light. And it doesn't make sense to do that, because if you approach this, it doesn't feel like anything. It doesn't feel like a real thing. So what we do is, when we do our strategy, the strategic part of what we do, we're looking at the purpose of the business. We play back what we call what we heard, which is we look at the insights of the business, we look at the insights of the audience, what they deliver for people, why they're doing that, its benefit to them, the relevance to them, the meaning to them, and why it serves them. And it means you can center around something that's specific for that brand rather than something that's specific for Gen Z or a generic trend or style. And what was interesting is everybody in this category tried to do something for everyone. A bit for you, a bit for you, a bit for you. But it doesn't work because it's dead. So the strategy on a really basic level for this was everything for someone. And the idea was to super serve people who were not being served and try and close the gap and sharpen in on you, not everyone. We can't actually get Tubi here in the UK, so not you, people who are in America and other parts of the world. But this is how it works. So we get it up on the wall. We put it on the wall because we like to have a safe space to look at creativity. It's contextual, it's not sequential on the screen. And you start to think about creating energy over perfection, trying things without trying to get to the answer too soon. Because if you try and get to the end result too soon, you're manufacturing something without necessarily knowing what you've won or going far enough to push beyond traditional ideas. And when we think about product design, which is, you know, the digital aspect of it, we try to think about the emotion, not the product. What's the storytelling? What's the human interaction? What's the reason that the product exists for people, as well as just, you know, being a wall of tiles like an old video shop? And controversially, we actually sketch things. We don't just use Figma. We actually use traditional methods of sketching, because if you use intelligent applied technologies to make everything, it's hard to imagine things because it's always about high finish. So we spend a lot of time making things where we just have an idea. And a lot of those are conversations. We say, we could try this, and we sketch it. If we like the idea, then we build it, we prototype it and test it, rather than going straight to the software to lay it out. Not that there's anything wrong with that. I like layout. It's a perfectly serviceable thing to do. And there's this really lovely idea from the advertising agency called Mischief in the US. Check them out. They're a fantastic ad agency. They had this idea of a rabbit hole, a thing that you went down and you discovered things. It came from Alice in Wonderland, and we thought it was a really wonderful idea. So we started to experiment about this idea of a rabbit hole being a portal, the idea of a device that you could stack and collate your ideas and the things you love together. And it started to rarefy into an idea, this kind of rabbit hole that could sit in the new identity, but create a device that would flow throughout the entire design system. And this is how it kind of comes to life. So there's language, illustration, form, color, things like this. And you'll see with the color palette, we went with something that's instantly recognizable, because we wanted visual cut through, because there's a lot of things that look very similar. And that's the audio signature. We'll come back to that later. And as we're doing that, we were talking to the client, and one of the things they wanted to do is keep things weird. They wanted to keep this idea that this is about a conversation and a share of voice and an attitude, rather than it just being a kind of static thing. And they really embraced this. This was a leadership thing where the CEO, the CMO, the head of product all bought off on the idea of pushing things forward. And it was this idea of too weird isn't in that vocabulary, because they've got like laser shark movies all the way across to like rom-coms, all the way across to like, you know, reality dramas. And, you know, you build the font, you build the language system, you build the tone of voice, you build the way it hits the world. And it means you have something to say. There we go. Back to the Tubi noise again.
You have to sing it. Do it. Oh.
I guarantee, it's my cast iron guarantee, you will hear that sound in your ear in 2 or 3 hours' time. And this is how it comes to life. It's out in the world, it's brand fame. But the audible signature means if you're in a room and you hear that, it makes you think something. It's Pavlovian. So there's a real power. 50% of a brand can be audible in terms of its effect on people. We like this idea that while you're doing the work, being the optimist in the room means that when you're looking at problems and changing things, it doesn't guarantee a great outcome, but it gives you a chance of doing something new and fresh. So we like that feeling. And one of the things that Tubi wanted to do, as I said, was serve underserved communities. So they did this thing, which was a really wonderful thing, a slightly tortuous name, but Stubios, where they've done a deal with Kickstarter. They've also done their own program where they provide money to fan-fueled people, creators, people who tell stories from underserved communities, give them money, and then they put that content on the channel, on the streaming platform. And what it's doing is shaping and giving voice to people who didn't have voice. And to me, access and doing things like this is where the brand really hits the real world for real, because you can say we're going to help people, but if you do it, it happens. And an interesting fact is prior to the rebrand, Disney had more interaction than Tubi. And post the rebrand, Tubi has more interaction than Disney. So quite a cool thing. We also work with Disney, which is a wonderful business, but it was a nice thing to have a kind of success metric. So, very different businesses there, very different thing. And then this is an entirely different kind of vibe, again, when you think about design. So we have this real belief that design can be generous. It's not about just kind of showing how clever you are. It's about making something that's useful. So we did a project recently for Rolly, which is a music technology business. They make intelligent keyboards and music learning platforms. And what's interesting is when we met them, they had two audiences. They made really powerful tools for people like Hans Zimmer to make music for like incredible movies or production. But it was also for Hannah, who's somebody who wanted to learn how to play music and was often put off by a piano teacher or something. So it was a really schizophrenic business. And what you're thinking about is, where does music show up in people's lives? It's performance, it's sharing, it's family, it's private, it's open, it's creating, it's learning, it's lots of things, and it defines you as a person. It's really important. And when you think about that interaction and that sense of making things, there's this suggestion potentially that clients are these hard-nosed people that give you feedback and they tell you off and all that stuff. But clients are people, they're not logos, they're people with vision, they're people with pressures, they're people with purpose, and they're people like us. And it's their actual job to give you feedback, actually, to be truthful. But this is Roland Lamb. He's the founder of Rolly, and he wants 1 billion people to get access to music learning. That's what he really wants to do. He's a musician himself, he's a Buddhist monk, he's a really smart, intelligent man. But he had this dream of helping people learn to play music. And within that was this idea of freeing the music in you, which I think is a really wonderful sentiment that it doesn't matter if you're an expert or a first-time learner, it's about how you express yourself and live through the power of music. And as you do that, there's this thing which is failure is not the opposite of progress. There's always periods when you're making things where you fuck up, you fail, and it doesn't work. It doesn't matter. The best ideas come from those periods where things didn't work. So we were working on this 3D idea music. Roland was heavily into calligraphy at the time, so he did a lot of calligraphy. Really good fun. That's Prashant doing calligraphy. He got very, very good at it. Really quite good fun. We did a lot of technology, humanization of scanning humans to look at how they could affect the motion of the brand, things like that. So we're doing super lo-fi hands-on to kind of digital hands-on, and a really interesting interplay of different ways of looking at the experience for the brand. And then, the campfire I was talking about, we shouldn't have done this, we did 5 different ways of doing the brand, and we shared them with the client at the campfire. And it was a bit weird because none of them were right. For whatever reason, we just didn't feel it, and they didn't feel it. And we were like, man, okay, so we basically started again. And kind of building on that idea I was talking about it's really important to remember that creativity isn't about avoiding mistakes. It's about making mistakes, learning from them, and applying that to the next thing. It's okay for an agency not to have it right first time. We're not all magicians. We're not all perfect. We're just making creativity, and it's a messy, spontaneous thing. So it's absolutely cool to make bad work before you make good work, and you make good work before great work. So it's fine. You don't want to do it too often, otherwise you'll have a career, but it's okay in the process. So we circled back to something really pure, which was the keyboard. And we found this device inside the keyboard, which could help inform the identity in a much simpler and a more elegant way. And it could create a system for the identity for the different products and services. and the different elements. And then it could build a system that could flex for those different audiences. So it could move for a musician and a creator through the products and the services and the things that they make. And then it can move into somebody who is learning and playing. And it allows the brand to have great flexibility at the point of impact. It doesn't have to be one thing for everybody. It can be adaptive. And when we did the colour, we did it on this idea of circular fists, which is a musical concept, but we use colour in the same way. And the reason for that, it meant that we could have a core colour palette, a palette for creators, a palette for learners, and also, excitingly, a palette for kids, which was great, much messier and much more fun. But it meant there was a colour theory to the identity. And those tests we did earlier, they weren't lost. It meant when we did the motion theory for the brand, we could use those human elements we learned through calligraphy and involve it with music, but in a much more sophisticated way, so you could feel the energy of that. And then this is how it kind of plays out. And how long have I got left, Katie?
Couldn't find my microphone then. You've got another 10 minutes.
Perfect. We're on time. Fantastic.
Fab.
I'm not waffling too much. But you can see...
No more than usual.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Cheers to that. So you can see how it comes together. It means you can break components out to have like really graphic components. You can make things which are much friendlier, more playful if you're in that situation. Again, you can make it more stylish rather than family. And there's something really nice about that. But it all comes from the same language. They did a great music event to launch it in this underground cavern, which is quite good fun. So we lit the place up with a light. So, design for someone, not everyone. We talked about this, but we think it's really important because if you forget the audience, you're kind of lost, certainly at the scale of work we work on. So while we're working on 2B and Formula One, we were also working with Roblox, which is basically it's a gaming platform, and it's definitely more than a kids gaming company. And they came to us and they had this kind of really strange thing, which is they're a massive company. 1 billion people use them every month. And they have 40 million different experiences, creators, gaming platforms, ways of interacting. But what was really interesting is for a lot of the people who use this is about social currency, how you interact and play and interact with your friends. And for us, that's what it's all about. It's understanding how the brand shows up in the world, because if you just go at gaming, you put lots of lasers on it and targets, and it's all very hard. But that's not what Roblox is about. It's about a 13-year-old chatting to a friend and enjoying things and building things. So the team spent a week playing computer games. We built our studio virtually in the Roblox platform. So that's one of the team. I think that's Holly. Yeah, that's Holly going to her desk, sitting down, and that's the DB Studios with a slight enhancement because we've got trees in it. But we got to understand the product. What it means is we're understanding what it's about. And what was really interesting was this idea that it's about reimagining how people come together, because in this world, this is what they know. It's how they feel relaxed with people. It's how they reflect themselves as people. It's how they create. And in a sense, it's about endless possibilities because it changes with your mood, your situation, your age, what you're into. And it's a highly democratized space. So we spent a lot of time thinking, and then is that going to play? Yeah, it's going to play. Rather than doing the lo-fi thing, we actually jumped into testing because we had a sense that it would be dimensional. So we used, I guess, intuition and intention to create things where we tested very quickly in motion how the system might come together, because we figured it would be a universal system, many experiences that open and collapse within a particular idea. And this is what we created, which is what's called a tilt. And it's an angle that comes out of the identity, and it creates a device that is part of the identity, but frees it up to be much more experiential. And we're thinking about, okay, what's that experience? And it's got to be really delightful, but it has to work. There's no point in making something that looks awesome, but if people can't use it well. Because this is what you're actually making, very similar to Formula One, this fix and flex idea where you have the really robust elements that deliver the font, the idea, the system, and things like that. But that's not what a brand is. It's how that's translated into experiences that move around and serve people on their terms and become part of the conversation, and they can interact with in the way they want. But the team in the company, the team at Roblox, can make their own version of that. We're not telling them what to do. We're teaching a person to fish. So we give them video tutorials, we give them the elements, we give them the systems and the habits and behaviors, things like that. Then they go and make new things. And that's a brand. A brand isn't giving someone a PDF with a bunch of logos and a color and saying, don't fuck with it. That's not a brand. So it's not a brand in our version, I should say. And a bento box is not a brand either. And the idea was about creating anticipation. There's something really joyful about creating anticipation of something you want to do. And we're very lucky to work with companies that are very iconic and people want them in their lives. We're not trying to force something on something. We're not trying to sell anything. We're just trying to create an experience. And it was really interesting. This little lo-fi, this is Holly again on her way to the studio. This little lo-fi text really resonated with the client because they suddenly realized they could have a physical, well, not a physical, but a virtually physical environment for their identity rather than just being the logo. And we kind of blew that out. So, like I say, from the logo, we blew that out to how you do art direction and the form and the dimensional quality. So it's working in Z space as well as dimensioning over time. And it's a much, much more dynamic system, but it's still truthful to the simplicity of what they are. And what it's really doing is putting this universe of ideas in your pocket because you're carrying it around in your hand, really. That's what's ultimately about. And it allows people to reskin things, to bring their own personalization to the system. And those avatars and things are really important. And this for us is the big balance. You need to create a brand that works in the real world because you have that real world interaction things, but it also has to work digitally. So when we think about UX and UI, UX for us is from the real world all through the digital experience. And people come in at different points. So we don't look at it as product, brand, strategy, separate things. It's one universal way of looking at how brand works together. And this is what it is. We call it intelligent identity. Obviously, there's other ways of calling it, but what it means is you're filling the identity with meaning. You're filling it with something that is useful for people. You're giving them permission to use it on their terms. The client's ability to add value and to create themselves and be part of it and believe in it. And then when it reaches the world, what we want to do is build communities and build fans of the brand. And this is a little video that sums that up. And you'll see how it works. From that very simple device, you get an explosion of ways of interacting with it, lots of different styles and feelings and, ways of playing the games. And it's endlessly fun. You can just keep doing it. It's like it's eternal. So it gives them a lot of flexibility if they want to do campaigns or specific things or tactical things or times, periods and launches like that. So I'll wrap up now, but there's a couple of things I want to say. One thing is talent isn't rare, access is, and it's a really big thing for us. I think access to our industry is really important. Social mobility, different backgrounds, different lived experiences. They make it difficult for people to get into the industry. So what we've done is we've built a series of things, one of which is essentials. And this is the ethos of our company, the things that drive what we do, the principles that drive what we do. And what we're doing is sharing that with people. We've created journeys, which is a career map for every part of our company, all the different disciplines, every stage of your career. So everybody can see what that journey can be, but they can see other people's journey. We're going to share that as well. There's a lot. I'll show you that in a second. We have an intern academy, which pays the London living wage plus 10%. And Marta, who has just been promoted to our head of practice, who runs a studio, started in that intern program. So for me, in order to change the industry where the top leadership is different, it takes time and you have to invest in that. And you have to do that when no one's looking. So I think that part of our industry is really important. A great work needs more than one voice. It can't be a dude that looks like me. It's got to be a lot of different people. Not that dudes like me look bad. I'm obviously a very nice man, but we want lots of different people. So we've created this thing called the DixonBaxi.
Elevator pitch.
Don't shit yourself.
You're not behind the camera.
Elevator pitch, take one.
And that's the whole team are in that. And I'll talk about that in a second. But this is how we run the company now. It's about people first. If you get the people part of it right, you work with people that you care about, have a shared ambition, but everyone can show up in their way, the way they want to, you get better creative. If you do great creativity, you get paid well. And if you keep it in that order, what you're doing is you're creating a creative entity that's people-centric, and you monetize that rather than trying to make money off people. So that's how we run the company. And in order to be more open source, we've just relaunched the DixonBaxi website. Some people are still sat watching the black square at the beginning of it because they haven't clicked it yet. But I would recommend clicking the square if you go to our website, and this is what comes up. So our work, there's 2 new projects have launched today on our website. So you can go look at those if you fancy seeing our work. Our approach, the Essentials and Journeys books I talked about, we've digitized them so open source. The latest season of DixonBaxi Way 3 with the entire 52 people talking about our creativity and career journeys. And then Super Futures, the project talked about earlier, the first version of that remix is on there. So we're sharing that with the world. And that is me done. So thank you very much.
Well, a round of applause from me. I know everybody was really enjoying that in the chat. Thank you, Simon.
And I'm back in the room.
He's back in the room.
Thank you very much, folks.
Oh, it was so good. I remember watching this specific talk in Lancaster.
Oh, Katie said to see that more than once. I'm sorry.
Yeah. But I was telling everybody in the chat, you had to sing To Be last time. And I was like, shall I get him to sing it?
To be.
It was great. Right, let's get on to these Q&As because we've only got 15 minutes left. There are 26 questions. I'm not sure we're going to get through them all, but we will start with Martin. Will there ever be a better line of copy than MTV2 makes me want to smoke blue tack?
Good memory. No. That was right. That was the 24 years ago. That was the peak of my career. But wow. That was the reason that's cool is that when we did that project, there was no social media as there is now. So we used to go on blogs and take information about what people said about MTV2. And a real person said MTV2 makes me want to smoke blue tack. And no copywriter can write a line that good. So it was about using audience-centric language.
Love it. Very kind of like forward thinking for 24 years ago.
Yes, well, you know me.
Well, I'm not going to flatter you too much, Simon. One has to keep your head slightly smaller.
I don't do the work, do I?
Chris Wilson. Hello, Chris. Thanks for putting on the session. If DixonBaxi were a band, what genre of music would you play and what would your debut album be called?
Oh, that's the hardest question anyone's ever asked me. I really don't know. I don't know because everyone likes different music. So we will be a band that everyone was paid equally, made really cool music that was eternal rather than a trend-based music. And the album will be called Be Brave.
Nice. On the fly. Brilliant. Robert asks, many creatives struggle with the tension between following design trends to stay relevant versus developing a signature methodology that transcends time. Over your 24-year journey, how have you cultivated that balance between creative evolution and maintaining a strategic process that makes DixonBaxi's work so recognizably excellent?
Thank you. The last bit is very kind of you. You can't be relevant if you're on the trend. It doesn't make sense. What you're basically doing is doing what everyone else does, which is not adding anything new to the environment. So trends are really not a cool thing. There are trends as in like cultural trends, behavioral and technology trends, but creative trends means that you're basically doing what other people do. So there's no distinction to that. There's no share of voice there. So my recommendation is make the work you want to the way you want to make it, trust that process and find people who want to collaborate with you and do that and fuck everything else.
Love it. Great. Next one. Sunak asks, when you set out 24 years ago, you had a vision of what your journey would be like. How much has that vision changed in the past 24 years? And what has been the biggest factors behind that change from the original vision?
Well, the interesting thing is we didn't have a vision for the future because you can't. It's impossible. So when we started the agency, there was no social media, there was no Google, no Uber, no COVID, no AI, no self-driving cars,
no Katie
Figma.
Cowan.
No Katie Cowan, no product designers, no creative boom, which, God, shit, that's a candle that would be sad to lose. But in all honesty, none of those things existed. What we said was we wanted to create a certain way, feel a certain way for people, and then apply that to the world, whatever change comes. And that's basically what we do. So when a new technology comes along, we apply the same creative sensibility, but use that technology to reach people, interact with them, and serve them. So I don't think anybody can have a vision for the future. It doesn't work like that. It's about having a vision for how you want to create, why you want to create, who you want to create with, the benefits of that, and how it defines you as a creator in your life. Do that, find a space that's yours, and use any change and be part of the change, and you'll have a long career. If you try and be something that's projecting the future, you'll get, I mean, I didn't know COVID was coming 5 years ago, did I? You know, so you just have to live the reality, have and control the things you can control and not the things you can't.
Brilliant answer. Thank you. Katie asks, I love the expansion on saying no. I started full-time freelance and I'm beginning to sharpen my focus from a generalist to a specialist. Do you have any advice on what would be best to focus on? Do I focus on what I enjoy, but may be hard to obtain, or what I'm good at, or go with the flow and see what I fall into?
I can only say from my experience that it's worth the effort and risk to work the way you want to work, because you're living someone else's dream otherwise. There is a reality to life, which you have to pay rent, you have to live, you might have a family, there's actual realities. So whenever I say this, there's a caveat of that you have to obviously exist in the world and live. But I think we're very lucky to create for a living. It's a profoundly amazing thing. It's joyful to create for a living. So creating for a living in a way that doesn't suit your way of creating feels quite sad. So I've always, like when I started out, I did 3 other jobs in order to make enough money for me to get into the industry. So I didn't have to compromise on the type of work I wanted to do, but I made that personal choice. So it's up to the individual. I don't think there's a generalist specialist thing. There's a lot of conversation about this. It's not real. It's like you're a type of designer and you can be, you know, I'm a generalist in some senses, but I'm also a specialist in other areas. So just don't believe these blunt ideas. They're very heavy and blunt, and the world isn't really like that. Make work that matters to you. Show people why it matters, its effect. Tell a story about that. Show up in a curious, positive, additive, and optimistic way. Find people you want to work with, and you have a great career.
Brill. I'm just going to go and delete that. It's the Age of the Generalist article on Creative Boom we launched this month. Anyway,
But you probably should.
Moving swiftly on. Hull asks, what is something you wish you had known earlier in your career that has made the biggest difference to your success?
Be more people-centric. So what happens is when you're younger, you're very selfish. And I mean that in a positive sense, which you're developing your own version of the world and you're trying to find your form and what you are. And then as you develop your career, you realize that it's about how other people interact with you, about collaboration and shared experience. And the more I focus on people, the happier I am. The more the people are happy, the better the work is. So that's it really. But the thing I believe is you're an aggregation of everything you've ever done and ever learned. And in any given moment, as I sit here now, I'm fulfilled. So it doesn't matter what I did in the past because it got me to where I am now. So I think I have everything in my hand that I've got. What can I go do with that? And that's how I see the world. So I don't really think about the past like that.
Okay, brilliant. All right, Karina asks, how do you balance strategy and instinct when making bold design decisions?
Instinct's a powerful thing if it's fueled by something. So you might have this thing where you meet a prospective client and they're talking about a problem and something pops in your head, and that's an instinctual thing that comes from experience, having done many problem-solving projects, and you go, that could be the answer. But of course, if you do the proper strategic work where you meet the team, you look at how the company works, how it serves people, what it does, the cultural relevance around that, competition set, where the world is going, you build up a lot of insight. And then you look at the insights and you think of the biggest drivers. And then when you start thinking intuitively from there, your mind is fueled. And the key really is to take the strategy, soak it all up, and then let it sit there and don't reference it while you create for a while. And your mind draws the things that are most important, or that's what I find. So you're balancing those two things. They're not in opposition or kind of separate. It's about fueling your mind with life experiences, insights, things. And then when you create spontaneously, you draw on those things. And then when you look at it, you then use the insight to say, what have we won? Does that make sense? Is there something missing? And you do it again. So that's the balance.
I think we underestimate ourselves sometimes, don't we?
Yeah. And also to a certain extent, it's about conversation. So if you want to go far, you need to talk to people about that you're going to do that. So if you're working with somebody and they haven't, they're not brand specialists, we are, all of us are creators. clients are specialists at what they do. So what you have to do is talk to them and say, well, we're going to go on a journey. And parts of that journey will be uncertain and uncomfortable. We're probably going to go too far and come back. And along the journey, keep referencing where we are. You take people on that journey. If you expect them to turn up and show them a load of work and go, it's great, it's amazing, can you buy it? That's not collaboration. So a lot of people get freaked out by that. So if you want to go far, bring people with you.
Yeah. Happy clients are clients that are partners, definitely.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
So Kerry asks, your team really seem like the lifeblood of DixonBaxi. I'm in the process of building out my creative team. How did you take those leaps to go from 2 to 10, the old classic, to 20 to 52? And how do you make decisions on hiring employees versus freelance support in that, what is a really tough growth phase?
Well, there's 3 questions in there, so that's a triple loaded one. So
Yeah.
it phases based on ambition, circumstance, and your position in the world, basically. So you start out making work. If you get good at it, you basically settle in the industry at the level you deserve based on the effort you put in to get good at what you do. That's the same with any industry. So a lot of practice, a lot of getting good, make the work amazing, then everything else is easier. And then you go, well, I like the intimacy of a very small agency, so I just like to stay 5 people, and I feel cool with that. But if you want to grow, you grow in phases, and everybody's got different leaps. Everyone says 35, 12, whatever. But you basically grow on workload. So you go, wow, we're really busy with 5 people. We could get some more work. Should we hire some people? And you make a choice. There's a risk inherently to that. Because if you do, you've then got to get that work consistently to make sure you don't let people go. So my feeling is when you grow, if you grow steadily, what I don't like is businesses which are like an accordion where they hire 50 people, make loads of money, things go bad and let 40 people go. That's not a business.
Yeah.
That's a bunch of chances. Now, some people do get affected by things like COVID. It's a different thing. But I think what you've got to do is grow sensibly in a way which protects people, but at the same time manages the ambition. So if you want to work at a certain scale, you might need more people, you might need different disciplines. When it comes to permanent versus freelance, we much prefer permanence because we can mentor and develop people's careers. But what we do is bring experts in who are better than us at certain things. So 3D specialists, audio specialists, creators, editors. So it's a combination, but we treat them as experts, not freelancers. They're people who bring greater knowledge of a particular thing. But I'd rather build skills in the team. So when we hand them on to the next person, they're better than when we receive them. And while we're working together, we're all growing as a team.
I love that. Great stuff. I hope that answered your question, Kerry. Evie asks a wide question on accessibility. If clients who come to you don't ask for accessible inclusions as part of their project, do you bring it up? Is accessibility a core part of all design going forward, and should it be? How can I, as a disabled artist, ask designers to make this a core aspect of their work for clients? Thanks.
Very good question. It depends on the accessibility.
Yeah.
Because obviously, say you're a designer who is deaf, that's a very different to somebody who can't see versus accessibility for neurodivergence, location, different things. So what you have to be is, there's 2 things. There's the kind of sensitivity to access to the industry to people who come from different lived realities and different backgrounds and different situations. And everybody identifies and lives through those things different ways, processes them. So you want as many different types of people to be able to create, because that broadens the richness of how we serve people. And then when you work on a scale of design, an absolute scale, you want to show that representation, but you want to create systems which are super exciting and dynamic, but they have versions which can simplify, rarefy, and be accessible for people at the point of access. Let's just say it's a digital thing and it's a legibility thing. You can simplify that at the point of access. And most of our clients are very sophisticated, so they have that hardwired into their systems. So if you're working with Amazon, they have that built into a lot of their systems. It's very much the same as the environment, sustainability, good business practice, those types of things. You look for that in the chemistry with a client. Are they a client that's looking forward and is willing to learn with you about what the next version of good looks like? Because I think it's all a work in progress. So that's how we look at it.
Love it. Okay, next up is Abhinav. He asks, what advice would you give to a young creative straight out of college trying to find their feet in the design world? It feels like everyone wants to get things cheap and fast, while true creativity takes time and investment. And explaining that to people who are supposed to be investing in their own businesses is so tough.
So I didn't quite understand the question. Can you give me the thrust of the question?
What advice would you give to a young creative straight out of college trying to find their feet in the design world? I guess he's probably experiencing, you know, the classic, you know, when we all got started and it was, you were trying to do projects and people wanting things for free and
say no.
Yeah.
Say no. That's it. That's the only answer. You just got to say no.
Just got to say no.
There's a number of things at play there. So I wouldn't work for free ever, and I never did. So I just did other things to protect me. So in a sense, I worked other jobs, so I had money, so I could say no. But again, that's me. Not everyone can afford to do that. But if you're working with people who persistently show up in the world and ask you to do things which feel uncomfortable or difficult, you're working with the wrong people. So again, there's a lot of generalization, which is, there's a generalization that is the industry. It's not. There's thousands of agencies that are incredibly thoughtful about how they hire people, grow people, pay people. Find those agencies. Don't work for fucking dicks. So that is the answer. Not everything is equal.
Yeah. Okay. One more question. Should we do one more question? Sorry, folks. I know you've asked so many brilliant questions. We're not going to get round to everybody, but I've got one more from Ian. If you could pin your 24-year story down to a single decision, action, or idea, what would that be? We are who we are now because of this.
It's not one thing. It's working the way you want to. Not working just for the system, the money, the business, but working the way you want to. And kind of working with people that you want to work with, but all in the service of the type of work that makes you happy and fulfilled. That's really the answer.
Brilliant. All right, that just leaves us for you to choose out of those 11 answer questions. I think we did very well. Which would you like to be the winner? Can you see them all in the Q&A?
I can't remember the question.
You've got the Q&A there on Zoom if you can find it, and if you go on the sort of window, you can find. What's the
one that was really hard? Someone asked an album question.
Oh, that was Chris, I think. Chris Wilson.
Yeah, I think Chris wins.
Okay, well done, Chris. I will get in touch with you after the session and we will arrange. Oh, what are you going to pick, Chris? That's the question. A book or a 1-hour mentorship session with Simon? It's up to you. All right, Simon, thank you so much. This has been brilliant.
Thanks, Katie.
All right, thanks, everyone.
To see you as always.
Yeah, I'll let you go. Take care, everyone. See you soon.
Bye. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye. Right, there you go. That's it. See you later, love. Yeah, we're done. See ya. I'll drop you an email. Oh, he's gone. Thanks, everyone. That was fab. All right, take care. Bye-bye.